Hey everyone, welcome back. Thanks for being here. This is the episode or lecture on Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. It's at least the first one. I don't know if it'll be all of them. Um, if you can watch the video, you see here that I have Sophia. She's being very cuddly. This is supposed to be my annual Aristotle birthday bash. I had my birthday yesterday though, and I didn't get this video made on my birthday like I wanted to, but that's okay because I took a nap instead. Um, clearly I needed it. Clearly I needed It's such a paradox because if for whatever reason I don't do what I need to do to rest or something, um, the lectures won't be very good. So I can't just force them out. I kind of have to like balance and listen to myself. And that kind of brings us to, honestly, to our first guiding question. Um, how is eudaimonia, eudaimonia, how does eudaimonia mean happiness, but not hedonistic or egoistic pleasure? And that's a complex answer that makes more sense the more you understand all of Aristotle. Um, but we'll start answering it at the beginning and keep answering it throughout with these different details. Before we get too far into the questions, I do want to read all of the assigned text, which is a few excerpts. It's all of book two, just a few sections from book one, and one section from book eight, chapters, not sections. Um, all of book, so the two chapters from book one, all of book two. The two chapters on book one are about the Platonic universal one good versus the many goods. And it's Aristotle's critique of Platonic metaphysics, more or less, um, or metaethics, really. And the arguments are tight. Aristotle in general is terse, meaning that he says, well, I would say that he says exactly what he means to say and nothing more. Um, but actually, these are more likely to be lecture notes. So he says even less than what he means to say. He says what he can quickly read and then ramble on about for a little while. We lost a lot of Aristotle's work, and his entire canon is incomplete. What we do have are just these versions without explanations, where it's just the tight arguments, sentence by sentence. For example, this is an entire argument. Moreover, we think happiness is most choice-worthy of all goods, since it is not counted as one good among many. If it were counted as one among many, then clearly we think it would be more choice-worthy if the smallest of goods were added. For the good that is added becomes an extra quantity of goods, and the larger of two goods is always more choice-worthy. There's a logical argument in there about how the good can't be a composite thing because then you could always make it better. It has to be a system of relations of goods. And that's what eudaimonia is. It's a right living a stable, healthy state of engagement with your community. Um, and it's also understanding that you're not separate from your community, that your community is not a reflection of you necessarily, but is in some ways is. And you're responsible for them. You get to lead different lives to your community. I think that's a big part of eudaimonia is that um, I can't do everything in this body in this one set of however many years I get. Um, but I can kind of live vicariously or try to empathize with people in my community to see what their lives are like and get that access. Um, literally, there's the word daemon in there, like from Socrates. Socrates had a voice that told him when not to do things, and he was happy and at peace and stable when he was on good terms with his daemon. So eudaimonia, meaning a long-lasting state of harmony with your inner spirits or your inner voice. In fact, pretty much just like the justice of the Republic. Um, in the Republic, in Plato's Republic, justice is any action which preserves and reinforces and increases and augments, right? Sustains and then improves the harmony and the well-being of the soul, where the different aspects of the soul are free and peaceful to move in unison and they're not conflicting and they're not, uh, yeah, They're like a chord that works well together. And that's what eudaimonia is. Eudaimonia is the state. For Aristotle, Aristotle also says that it's not something you can know until the end. Like the complete happiness, the ultimate system of goods, you wouldn't be able to evaluate that in this life. He does have a section on can we be happy in this life. I haven't read all of Nicomachean Ethics. I haven't read all of the Republic. I think I can count on maybe not on one hand, but I've definitely read excerpts and pieces in detail much more than I've read um, any one thing all the way through. I really dig into something, and so it takes me a while to process like the sentences and the paragraphs. Um, oh my gosh, I love Sophia, but her mouth is terrible, and the poor thing is always covered in drool. Okay, so yeah, um, it's not hedonistic or egoistic pleasure. Hedonistic meaning like seeking, meaning seeking to maximize pleasure. Um, you can be hedonistic without being egoistic. Like you can think that you enjoy other people's pleasure, and so it maximizes your own pleasure to maximize other people's pleasure, but you're still doing it for your own reasons. That's different from eudaimonia, and it's different from the other two ethical theories that we'll talk about. So that may be something that I haven't said yet. This is virtue ethics. So this is one of the big three ethical theories. It was the big one for 2000 years until Kant and Mill came along. Although Kant argues that he didn't create anything, he just put down in writing what everybody already was doing for ethics. So Kant's system supposedly had been in place just naturally because it's just natural law, right? That's what Kant thought. It's part of his argument. Anyway, for virtue ethics, the big idea is the mean. That's number two. I'm not sharing my screen. Sorry. It's not a big deal. I've been reading the questions, but yeah, I've just had it on these guiding questions this whole time. So the first one, how does eudaimonia mean happiness but not hedonistic, egoistic pleasure? And then how does the mean of virtue allow just action to depend on history and context? And these guiding questions, again, are always posted on my website. When I update them, I try to upload the new file. Um, my website's all self-coded. It's not like there's no interface that I use to drag elements here, drag elements there. Um, it's from a templating program that also is run with code in a terminal. Um, it's for free through GitHub Pages. It's really cool. Totally recommend it. The program is called Jekyll and it uses Ruby. And it uploads these podcasts. So I appreciate them. Um, and yeah, you can find the guiding questions on the website too. So how does the mean of virtue allow just action to depend on history and context? This is pretty complicated and more complicated than what the text involves. Um, Going back, let me finish number one, hedonistic versus egoistic pleasure. So you can be hedonistic while still caring about other people and wanting them to be happy. And that's not virtue ethics. Virtue ethics is about seeking eudaimonia through the mean, through friendship, um, and through improving your own set of stable virtues. For Aristotle, reason is something that is embodied, meaning, um, I don't know if I can find the exact line, but he says something like you enact reason or This is a good one. Presumably, though, it matters. This is book one, chapter 8, section 9. So this is part of the assigned reading. Presumably, though, it matters quite a bit whether we suppose that the best good consists in possessing or in using. That is to say, in a state or in an activity that actualizes the state. So activities create states in the body, they create habits and tendencies. So you do an action and you repeatedly carve that action into your being by doing it over and over again on different days or for whatever reason. And eventually it becomes a tendency or a state. This is, I mean, the very first instance, this is not the first instance, but an obvious instance of this is classical conditioning. Um, and operant conditioning too. In classical conditioning, successive actions tend to follow one another. You tend to do, if you repeatedly do B after A, then the next time you do A, you're likely to start doing B without, even if you don't need to. Um, I think this is what I was thinking of. This is book two, chapter 4, virtuous actions versus virtuous character. The agent must also be in the right state when he does them. He must know that he is doing virtuous actions. Second, he must decide on them and decide on them for themselves. And third, he must also do them from a firm and unchanging state. Hence, actions are called just or temperate when they are the sort that a just or temperate person would do. It seems circular, but it's grounded in practice and experience, so it's flexibly true always. But the just and temperate person is not the one who merely does these actions, but the one who also does them in the way in which just or temperate people do them. It is right then to say that a person comes to be just from doing just actions and temperate from doing temperate actions, for no one has the least prospect of becoming good from failing to do them. This is the part next that made me think of reason um, as a character, something that's embodied that you have to like, yeah. The many, however, do not do these actions. They take refuge in arguments, thinking that they are doing philosophy and that this is the way to become excellent people, right? They think that philosophy is in the output and not in the person. That reason is in the output or in the work and not in the person. Virtue ethics honors the fact that logic and reason, it's a different thing. That it honors the fact that they're stored in a person as character and drawn and retrieved from that person as character in moments of crisis and just daily living. Anyway, they are like a sick person who listens attentively to the doctor but acts on none of his instructions. Such a course of treatment will not improve the state of the sick person's body. So they don't listen to the arguments because the arguments try to drag them back to like changing who they are, but they don't change it. Nor will the many improve the state of their souls by this attitude to philosophy. There may have been another area. This is the sentence where he says that we develop the virtues by practicing the right things, and then those virtues actually only consist in continuing to do the right things. So there's no like end to the project of becoming a good person. Like you do enough, you put it off to the side, you don't have to worry about it again. Um, but these actions are not only the sources and causes, both of the emergence and growth of virtues. So like you do them and they create virtues through habit and tendency and practice, and of their ruin. So if you do something else, or if you do contradictory habits and practices, you can deteriorate the edges of um, what your capabilities are, your affective edges. Um, there's a really excellent quote. I bet I can pull it up fast enough. I really like this quote from Deleuze. He says, gotta be, I think it's his 81 seminar. This is definitely it, but sorry, there's this one. Goodness, I'm really trying to find this. Okay. Guess it was in the University of Being. In other words, you will not be defined by your form, by your organs, by your organism, by your genus, or by your species. Tell me the affections of which you are capable, and I'll tell you who you are. Of what affects are you capable? Meaning, what can you do? Um, what impacts do you have? What is the stretch of your being? I forgot that Sophia likes to chew on my hair, which is disgusting. Okay, back to Aristotle. So yeah, doing other activities will change the edges of your capabilities, doing other habits and practices. Um, and then Aristotle goes on to say the activities of the virtues, once we have acquired them, also consist in these same actions. So it's just like in pragmatism, right? There's a sort of pragmatic notion to Aristotle where the truths that we come upon or the insights we have or the good reason that we practice is a set of tools for us to further more work. James says this. He says, for the pragmatist, a solution or a truth is only um, something to help the person create more stuff and figure more things out, accomplish new projects, go new places, solve new problems, help new people, those kinds of things. Um, If we have time, I would like to at some point go through the translator's introduction with you in this podcast or in this lecture podcast, because the translator's introduction has a lot of good stuff. I have it hosted on my website as part of the Aristotle text. Um, I can do some of that now. So let's get a little bit of context about Aristotle before we finish answering some content questions. The first thing I can tell you off the jump before reading this, and this is Terence Irwin, if I haven't said that yet, that should be the translator's name. Yeah. This is the second edition. Um, if you're in one of my classes, the excerpt that I've provided to you is from a digital copy of the third edition. So there are slight changes actually. Like I think the second edition might be a little bit clearer about what phrases have been added by the translator. I don't remember exactly, but I remember being a little bit surprised by some of the stuff in the third. It might be more like legible for a common audience. I'm not sure. Hackett's great. Hackett's always good. That's the publisher that we're using. Um, so I can tell you that Aristotle was not a Greek citizen, unlike Plato. Aristotle was a student of Plato, so Plato was kind of a student of Socrates, or at least followed Socrates around and learned from them. And then Aristotle, I think, studied at well, it'll tell us. Was a member of Plato's Academy until the death of Plato in 347. So he was a member of Plato's Academy for 20 years. Um, Presumably that means a student, presumably that means heavily involved. When Plato died, uh, his successor was Speusippus, Speusippus. And for whatever reason, Aristotle left Athens. I'm just reading from the excerpt. And I can put that on the screen actually, because it's right there. I was just reading these lines. Um, but then this is what I'm saying. Aristotle's known for the peripatetic school, which means that he was known for teaching while walking. As a non-Greek, as a non-citizen, he was not legally allowed to own property, or which meant that he couldn't like own a building or a plot of land and run a school on it. Um, so he did other things instead. And if you look at like pictures of him, you usually see him walking with his students because he could walk wherever and do whatever, but he couldn't own property. Um, which like does that make Aristotle the first proletarian philosopher? Plato's the first bourgeois, first member of the bourgeoisie, because the proletarian typically come into class consciousness by not having property, um, and coming up against all these problems that people with property don't face. Oh, okay. Aristotle was born in Stagira in Macedon, now part of northern Greece, in 384 BC. In his lifetime, the kingdom of Macedonia, or of Macedon, first under Philip and then under his son Alexander, the Great, conquered the Greek cities in Europe and Asia, and then went on to conquer the Persian Empire. The Macedonian rulers made elaborate efforts to present themselves as Greeks. They were not entirely successful in these efforts, and many Greeks regarded them as foreign invaders. Though Aristotle spent much of his adult life in Athens, he was not an Athenian citizen. He was closely linked to the kings of Macedon, and he was affected by the volatile relations between the Greek cities, especially Athens and Macedon. Um, I'm reading a pretty, sorry, I'm trying to keep my hair off of Sophia so she doesn't chew on it. And I'm also trying not to look like a mess. Um, I'm reading this book right now, or I started it, and it's been a while, but I'm still reading it. Uh, about Alexander the Great's conquest, quote unquote conquest. Large military campaign, put it that way. Alexander the Great's large and protract like long. I think it took up his entire adult life. Um, I think he died at 30 or 31. 32. So anyway, I think Alexander started this uh fight when he was 20 because his dad was killed by the Persian Empire. Yeah. So the the book I'm reading though is um I don't know where I said he was doing a large military campaign, but it was Persia and modern day Afghanistan. And it draws parallels between sort of like military conquest and indigenous resistance, and indigenous cultural differences. Um, so, for example, how, like I was talking about with Ed, how cultures build up around environmental needs. And so if you are an invader coming in to try to conquer, you're going to face the struggles of not knowing the environment, and you're fighting against people who do know the environment and whose entire way of getting food prepared is built around that. Like their childhood was around the desert, around the ice. These really extreme environments are not places you can conquer. Aristotle was the son of Nicomachus, a doctor who had been attached to the Macedonian court. In 367 BC, Aristotle came to Athens and was a member of Plato's Academy till the death of Plato in 347. Plato's successor as head of the Academy was his nephew Speusippus. At that time, Aristotle left Athens first for Assos in Asia Minor, where the pro-Macedonian tyrant Hermias was a patron of philosophical studies. Aristotle married Pythias, a niece of Hermias. They had a daughter, also called Pythias. Not sure that this is all important. After Hermias was killed by the Persians, Aristotle traveled farther. He moved on to Lesbos in the eastern Aegean, and then back to Macedon. He was a tutor of Alexander the Great. In 334, he returned to Athens and founded his own school, the Lyceum. After the death of Pythias, Aristotle formed an attachment to Hercules, and they had a son, Nicomachus, named following the Greek custom after his grandfather. In 323, Alexander died in the resulting outbreak of anti-Macedonian feeling in Athens. Aristotle left for Chalcis on the island of Euboea, where he died in 322 BC. In his will, Aristotle directed that Pythias's bones are to be placed in his grave in accordance with her wishes. He also made provision for the support of Hercules and Nicomachus, his children. The nearly complete, so this is about his works and what we have access to. The nearly complete modern English translation of Aristotle's extant works in ROT. I don't know what ROT is. I'm sure it says it somewhere. There's a convention for abbreviations. I don't have the full thing here. So ROT, the Revised Oxford Translation. Okay. Uh, The nearly complete modern English translation of Aristotle's extant works in the Revised Oxford Translation, ROT, fills about 2,450 pages. Mind you, these are the incomplete works. Many of his works, however, have been lost, and those that survive complete are quite different in character from many of the lost works. Among the lost works are dialogues, probably similar in character to some of Plato's dialogues, and other treatises designed for publication. Aristotle may refer to some of the lost works when he speaks of his popular writings. The Aristotelian corpus, as we have it, largely consists of works that appear to be closely related to Aristotle's lectures. Sometimes he seems to refer to visual aids of the sort that might be present in a classroom. Sometimes the grammatically incomplete sentences and compressed allusions suggest notes that a lecturer might expand. This is what I was saying earlier. We cannot tell how many of his treatises Aristotle regarded as finished. We probably ought not to treat them as finished literary works. They may be more like files that Aristotle revised, expanded, summarized, or combined for different teaching purposes, or when new ideas struck him. In the Greek manuscripts, the corpus is arranged as follows. Um, so there are basically five groupings here. The first group is the categories on interpretation, DI, APR, which is the prior analytics, APO, which is the posterior analytics, and top, which is the topics. These are traditionally known as the organon instrument, because they deal with logic in Aristotle's broad sense, which is an instrument of philosophical thinking, not a discipline with its own specific subject matter. Be interesting to read about. Okay, two, the physics, DC, which is on the heavens, de cielo, GC, which is generation and corruption, METR, which is meteorology, DA, de anima on the soul, PN, parva naturalia, HA, historia animalium, history of animals, PA, parts of animals, MA, movement of animals, IA, progression of animals, GA, generation of animals. These belong to natural philosophy, dealing with different aspects of nature. So these kind of came before science, the natural sciences. It used to be called natural philosophy. And more recent philosophers don't really mess with natural philosophy because we do it with science instead. Or they became scientists and they've focused on experimentation and repeatability, replicability. Aristotle was probably the first scientist, the first biologist. Not probably, was. Um, MET, metaphysics. This deals with first philosophy, the study of reality in general. First philosophy, we'll get this with Descartes actually next week. First philosophy, because the full name of the meditations in Descartes is the meditations on first philosophy. And what that means is that you can start there. You don't need anything else. You can block everything else out. You just start with one thing and you can go from there. It doesn't necessarily need to be composite, like foundational. It is not the sense that you start with one thing and then you build from it with conclusions that are obvious or part of that one thing or what have you. But it is a starting point. You don't need a background for first philosophy. Um, and then Nicomachean Ethics, which is EN, not NE. Uh, six deals with metaphysics. We don't do six. Could be fun. Virtues of thought. Hmm. I will probably do an addendum lecture on six at some point. Um, Meaning I'll come back and record an explanation of it. But for now, we're not messing with it. Seems interesting. Prudence and wisdom, phronesis. I should cover phronesis more than I do. Mostly we cover reason, the good, pleasure, multiplicity, friendship, otherness, care, the mean, history, how the mean depends on your personal history and the history of the situation you're in. To do, to do. Okay, we're almost there. Group four, EN, which is Nicomachean Ethics, MM, which is the Magna Moralia, Great Ethics, EE, which is the Eudemian Ethics, and Politica, Politics. These belong to practical philosophy, which deals with action rather than production. Rhetorics and poetics. These deal with production rather than action. I wish I knew what those words meant. Um, Action's pretty obvious, but production, there's a glossary at the back. Okay. So the distinction between production and action is intrinsic motivation versus extrinsic motivation. In action, you're doing the thing for the sake of doing the thing, and it's good in itself. Sleep or well-being, or if you're religious, maybe worship or prayer is something that's good in itself. If you're philosophical, then thinking philosophy or contemplating the good or teaching other people to be good, those things that you just do because they're good in themselves. If you do something where the goal is not, it's not so much about the good, I guess, in their language, the book's language. It's about the telos or the aim or the end. And so if the aim is part of the process, if it's an intrinsic goal, an intrinsic good, then it's going to be an action. And so therefore your virtues must also be intrinsically motivated and actions. They can't be productions. The reason I was curious about it is because production is also used in a metaphysical sense often to talk about the transcendental critique or the causal coming to being um, of some phenomena. So you could say like that matter is involved in the production of consciousness, or that um, extension is involved in the production of, I don't know. Um, your history is involved in the production of your present interpretation of a situation. Some kind of background process that culminates in something, but that's not how they're using it here. They mean it like craft. Aristotle presents ethics as a distinct discipline, relatively independent of other areas of philosophy. Nonetheless, he often refers to or relies on his other uh, philosophical doctrines. So see activity, capacity, cause, ethics, function, human being, science, soul. Readers will read the EN, the Nicomachean Ethics, with more understanding if they also read the most immediately relevant parts of Aristotle's other works. For a start, they might try categories 1 through 9, which is the doctrine of categories, posterior analytics 1 or I, 1 through 3, II, lowercase Roman numeral 219 on science. The topics I and the dialectical method practiced in ethics. Physics II and physics III1 on nature, cause, and movement. DA, which I don't remember what that is, de anima. I1, II 1 through 4 on soul. I like II 5 through 11 on perception, II 4 on understanding, III 9 through 11 on desire and action. I like the anima a lot. It's just a really difficult book to teach. So I'd like to add that one day. Posterior, no, PA is parts of animals. Part PA, parts of animals, I1 on nature. MA7, movement of animals on practical inference. Metaphysics I1 on science, 6, 9 on Socrates and Plato. IB 1 through 2, IX 1 through 8 on capacity and activity. This is all from the metaphysics. And metaphysics XII on God. Fun stuff. This next section just says that there's some overlap where a few of the middle books in both. There are three ethical treatises, the Magna Moralia, the Eudaimonia Ethics, and the Nicomachean Ethics. And there's overlap between some of them. So the Magna Morality was not written by Aristotle, but is very likely his ideas. Students' notes. And the other two, the Eudaimonia Ethics and the Nicomachean Ethics, were likely edited by a member of the Lyceum and the son of Aristotle, Aristotle's son Nicomachus, Eudemus from the Lyceum. And so there was a tradition of students editing lectures, and they're kind of like, I don't know, it's like the gospel according to, right? It's somebody else's version of the teacher. It is widely agreed that the MM, yeah. I already said that. Eudaimonia is usually considered earlier than Nicomachean. So books 5 through 7, which we don't read, or not yet at least, um, are the same as books 4 through 6 in Eudaimonia Ethics. Basically, if the Eudaimonia, because there's like a lot of stylistic and doctrinal links between those chapters and the original and the rest of the Eudaimonia Ethics, and because the Eudaimonia Ethics came first, scholars largely agree that, or one interpretation is that Aristotle reused those lectures in a later course, basically. I would totally do the same thing. That's one of the reasons I like having these online lectures, is because I try to keep them flexible, is because, this isn't just for my Phil 1301 class. This is for anybody who wants it, and this is also for um, the random philosophy of art class I teach, or um, a once every few years upper level seminar, and we need to start off with an understanding of um, aspectual entanglement with de anima, right? How does the knower and the known come together in perception, which is basically also the intentionality structure in phenomenology. Anyway, Aristotle did that too. We're done with the introduction. I want to spend some time finishing answering these questions before I wrap this video. How does the mean, so we've pretty well talked about eudaimonia, but it involves like it involves striving and thriving. Um, and being engaged in a community. And then, oh, that was weird. Uh, Being engaged in a community and thriving, living well, community engaged, harmony within our spirit. Um, Instrumental goods versus intrinsic goods. We've talked about that actually already, just in the process of things. Um, yeah. So Aristotle wants to figure out what the human excellence is. And so he needs to figure out what the human function is. And so then he needs to see what only humans can do. Plato did this similarly. He said only a soul can administrate, protect life, nurture, make decisions, those things. And so an excellent human is being excellent in a way that only a human can be. And so the human nature is to be rational agents, unlike plants and unlike animals. Plants have a growth component, and animals have a sensing component, I think. Although plants also have a sensing component because they move towards light and they do like have reciprocal feedback mechanisms where they get information and then respond to the data, or they experiment and grow, and like the roots will grow towards where the nutrients are and they grow seeking out nutrients. Um, and like sunflowers turn towards the sun throughout the day, every day. Uh, Plants like they grow in ways that they adapt. Like it's not an isolated process. Anyway, that's what humans are rational agents. They can fulfill these functions that other things can't do. They have reason. And so the human virtue would be a system of active goods and ends, so things that you continually re-experience, continually animate, and you need to have some degree of arousal or stress, not stress, but eustress is what psychologists call it when it's not too much and it's not too little. But there's some degree of urgency or energy flowing through you. You're not just a rock or like trying to think of a example that's not a loaded animal metaphor, like sloth, panda, snail, turtle. Um, you're not a human sludge, you know? Um, you can't just sit there meditating on, I mean, you can meditate, but you can't just sit there in a perfect world. To really feel the good in Aristotle involves reanimating it, animating the truth in new ways, animating the truth in new dialectics, new dialects, new conversations, new contexts. And doing that over and over again is very good. Um, and having lots of different experiences of that is very good. And that's basically eudaimonia. Even doing reason is its own kind of activity, which means its own kind of pleasure. So pleasures are different. And it's also, it feels good to be good at something. It feels good to do something well. So you fumble about with it, you get better at it, you keep at it, and then virtuous activity, right? What I'm saying, like you fumble about with it, builds virtuous character, or these like states or these tendencies that have been like repeated and carved in the person. And that creates virtuous habits because you'll just do them. And then when you go back to do them, they'll be better. They'll be more specific, more refined. Um, You could think about discussions in psychology or physiology about motor control and muscle memory and fine motor control, eye-hand coordination. Like I was playing, I like difficult games like Dark Souls, Soulsborne games, and Metroidvania games like Hollow Knight and Hollow Knight Silksong. Silksong just came out and I love it. It's a platformer, it's difficult. You have to like bounce and weave and very carefully move through. And like different hardnesses or lengths of button presses can jump further or jump shorter. You have to be very precise. Um, it's very punishing, and you learn through failure in these games. They have a steep learning curve. And I also like playing my other games on like the hard critical mode, like Kingdom Hearts or Horizon, Zero Dawn and Forbidden West. The Witcher, play it on hard too. Anyway, these things are improvements not only of like difficult games like that require a meditative focus that improves not only um your capacity to play that specific game, but also the complexity of perception itself and the pace of perception, the fixedness, how well can you track every instant of the telegraphing? Telegraphing is whenever a monster starts to do a prescribed action to signal let you know that something else is coming. And so you might have multiple enemies on the screen that you're fighting at once, and they may not be like difficult enemies, but they're doing different things. They're doing different telegraphs. Um, and the more you practice, the better you get at navigating these complex multi-polyrhythms. Um, and so it's skillful and it's also gratifying. It's fun. It feels good. It feels like a dance. That's a good way to put it because you're in harmony, you're in rhythm, you're weaving around and with the right things. But that's virtue ethics too. It's the process by which you create capacity and skill and virtue, right? Where virtue is an excellence, virtue is arete. Um, so you're able to do things, capable. The mean of virtue ethics, in virtue ethics, the mean is about we covered the roles of habit and practice in the formation of enacted virtue. That just means, like I described, you have these processes where you get better at things through practicing them. They become tendencies in your person. You tend to do them better, and they're not really virtues until you enact them again, until you do them again. Why must reason be enacted? Because you are always engaging with something. You're always meshing your perception up with some part of your world. And if you're not meshing it up with reason or with justice or with goodness or with virtue or excellence, um, then it's not there. It's simply not there. And how does it relate to a diversity of pleasures unique to each activity, pleasant in the doing itself, right? So then you need to have diverse pleasures. You need to go to the beach. You need to go to a museum. You need to read a book. You need to read a novel, read a poem, watch a movie, look at a painting, have coffee with a friend, have dinner with family, um, travel if you can do so without causing too much environmental damage, um, or if you can afford the resources like the finances to do so. And then all of these like diverse, complex pleasures and enactments, enactions into identifications between the knower and the known, right? Unities with perception in the world. Um, all of those create eudaimonia. So how does the mean of virtue? The mean is that the right thing to do will depend on the context, and you could never create a program that could always figure out what the right choice is, and any kind of law you come up with will lead you to contradictory choices and not the best choice. It's a way of deciding based on your character, your intuition, for the person involved in the situation, what they should do next. And what I should do next is not what you should do next. And what I do next is not how you should do what you should do next. Meaning that my mean or my just action or my appropriate decision will not be the same as anyone else's, even if they were in the same situation as me now, at least in part because for two reasons, they have different internal factors and they have different external factors. By internal factors, I mean genetics and present physical health, neurochemistry. By external factors, I mean education, family, history, likes, dislikes, perceptions, consciousness, pretty much everything else. I mean, most things. Very little is like internal to most of it's in the phenomenological conscious realm. Um, and so my mean will be very different than your mean, not just because we come up against different situations, but um, and the mean of the different virtues will depend on the role in society as well. So the mean of courage versus wisdom, or the mean of like listening immediately to a direction and going and doing it, versus thinking about what was said and deciding if it's the right thing to do, is going to be different depending on your role in a battle. A general will want to be reflective, or you'll want a general to be reflective, and you'll want a soldier to be instinctive. If the soldier was more like the general, they would not survive the immediate urgent conflict, the split second duck, dive, stab, whatever. The general, if they were making decisions like that, would send everybody to their deaths. And then even still, the mean of the appropriate action may depend on, may be different for two people in the same roles. Two soldiers may not see the same things. So one soldier may make a decision, a lethal decision, based on the threat that they saw coming. And the other soldier did not make the same decision because they could not see the same threat. Now, if they could have seen the same threat, they might have. This is called internalism, that if the same set of internal data was available to you, um, it would produce the same result. Anyway, there means the appropriate action for them to take the middle ground of too much courage versus too little courage, being afraid versus being reckless, or eating too much versus eating too little, being hungry versus being sluggish and lethargic from too many carbs. Um, there are lots of other examples. Too much indulgence versus not enough. Nobody wants to live a life where there's no pleasure, and they're probably not going to want to like listen to the directions or the teachings or the governance of somebody who never wants them to have pleasure and have a good life. They'll think this person doesn't know what it means to really live, to enjoy things. We need somebody in charge who wants us to enjoy ourselves. Um, there's going to be a mean. There's always going to be a mean, a middle ground. But that mean and middle ground may depend on physical position and what you can see, But what you can see is also dependent on how you were trained and what you notice and what you don't notice. It's sort of like there's a filter of interpretation or hermeneutics um on the uh prominence. Let's call it prominence of your perception. For example, right now, in just watching this video or listening, what is clicking? What is sticking out? What is prominent in your specific perception? Because it's not the same for each person. Some of you may notice the guitar on my wall. Some of you may have noticed the bear up there from when I was a child. You don't notice from when I was a child, or the Rubik's cubes, or the paintings, or the books, right? These things may or may not stick out prominently to you in your perception, and that is a factor from your childhood. It's an impact from something, some factor of historical embodied inter-environmental, intertemporal causes. And so your mean will be different than my mean because you will see different things, not just because you're in a different physical spot, but because you went through different physical spots your whole life and had different prominences and different hermeneutics and different interpretations of all your experiences based on really complex internal psychosocial factors of combination and recombination. A good example of this. Um, if two people are given orders in the military that seem like non non sequiturs, like this is a deal breaker. I've got to like to uphold my oaths to the Constitution. I cannot follow these orders. I must leave the service. I cannot have a good conscience if I do these orders, something like that. There will be very different opportunities for action for the wealthy person um, who can afford to leave with and still have a house, still pay rent, still pay their bills. Maybe they have family resources. Maybe they have some other way of making money. Maybe they have savings. Versus more often than not, the military is disproportionately composed of uh, the like poverty level working class, the proletariat, the poorest in society. And this is because they have fewer opportunities, they have fewer alternatives, and the military gives them a chance for resources. Um, their means are different, and they might be more hostile. They might, it might be difficult to empathize with the colonized when you can't see that their mean of wanting the colonizer to stop breathing down their neck. Um, their mean of just living is very repressed. Uh, and often, you know, one of the discourses that propagates is the colonizer perspective, where it's like, why are you grumpy? Why are you hostile? Can't you talk nice? Can't you be kind? And it's like, no, we're tired and beaten. Our mean is different. We're built different. It's not the same. Um, I tell a story usually about, it's true, about how my ex-partner who went missing, she went missing about a week after I moved back to New York. And a month later, I got our old belongings out of storage. We had split the storage unit payment for multiple years. It's about $300 or $400 per month by the end of it. And um, I had some help from family. I didn't have the money up front to get it out with like the movers and keep paying that monthly storage because she wasn't there to help split it anymore. And it would have been a lot of months of saving up and trying to catch up to that point. Anyway, So yes, I had privilege and help. But I tell this the story, the point of the story is that um there was like a end of year bonus one of the years I was teaching, and the management, like the principal and the assistant principal, were looking for any kind of reason to take that away from people. It was like $5,000. I think after taxes it was three. And it was enough for me to move back from New York to Texas if I couldn't find a different job, because my rent was more expensive than I could really keep up with without a full-time salary teaching job. And I had all of my ex's belongings that you can see behind me. That's her piano. This is her green couch. Um, that circle black thing is she had a friend, um she had a band called the Level Taurus, kind of her first band with a friend. And then a different friend stitched this, I don't know what it's called, but it says the Level Taurus on it. Anyway, I needed it to be safe and to protect her belongings, and it was really stressful, and it made me kind of hostile and defensive. Aristotle says that it's difficult to be angry in the right way at the right time. Um, that is why it is also hard work to be excellent. This is Book 2, Chapter 9, Section 2. For in each case, it is hard work to find the intermediate. For instance, not everyone, but only one who knows, finds the midpoint in a circle. So also getting angry, or giving and spending money, is easy and everyone can do it. But doing it to the right person, in the right amount, at the right time, for the right end, and in the right way, is no longer easy, nor can everyone do it. Hence, doing these things as well is rare, praiseworthy, and fine. Being angry in the right way. I mean, you can just imagine. Don't screw with Kay. That's her name. So yeah, I just wasn't having it. Now how was I angry? What way did I express that? It's kind of like passive. Um, there was an email chain about best song of the year, and it was like during the whole Kendrick and Drake beef. A lot of people said not like us for obvious reasons. And so my response was just like, uh, yeah, I agree, not like us is great, but I've had Euphoria on repeat lately. And Euphoria. Ooh. Um, yeah, about family and virtue and teaching and God. Um, so I finished out the year in good standing. Um, I got the bonus. I was able to get back to Texas. I'm grateful to my old managers. I was just really defensive at the time, I think, but I'm safe. So I'm sure this is a strange Aristotle lecture, but that's pretty much it. Um, you can see how, well, we do have the three types of friendship, but you can see how the mean depends on the context, depends on the person, depends on not just their role in society, not just their physical place in the world, but also their history, what they've been through, why they notice certain things and don't notice other things, um, why they react to things in the way that they react. Even people that notice the same thing in an environment will notice it different ways. You and me, for example, you may notice that guitar and think that I play it. I don't ever play it. I very rarely play it. Um, I have too many other things. But or it may remind you, maybe one of your parents played music, and so it just like makes you think of your dad, your mom. Um, there's so many differences just in perception itself that what the right action is really is not something you could lay the law down on. And so the mean is great. It's this really flexible virtue ethics. Um, Virtues are things that you do, that you build in yourself through activities. There are different kinds of virtues for different categories. You can have deficient or excessive in these virtues, in these categories. You can do too little or do too much. Um, the Goldilocks zone, the mean in Buddhism, the middle way is always the best. And that depends on, yeah, lots of things. And then three types of friendship. Um, this is a really quick 2 pages in chapter in book 8. And pro tip, it has historically been an option for the essay. It's really short and manageable. Um, I'm going to go through it real quick. So the three types of friendship are pleasure, utility, and care or virtue or the good. So in pleasure friendships, this is on our whiteboard too, but in pleasure friendships, this is mostly had between the young. Young people usually have pleasure or romantic friendships. They depend on the pleasure being felt, and so once that pleasure goes away, once that feeling is not there, it's not stable. It's not about, and so in pleasure, it's all about the present experience being mutually desired by both people. When the people change, the pleasure will not be overlapping, and so it won't be there anymore. Um, Similarly with utility friendships, they're fleeting because the business interests may change. It's about what's useful or what's good, what's productive. They may not want to be around each other, whereas pleasure friendships like to be around each other, like to live together so they can always be enjoying each other's pleasure. Utility friendships are kind of like stable things that are further away and you can't really stand each other. And so they can't even tolerate, really. That's what Aristotle says. Um, And then friendships of the good or friendships of care or friendships of character, they see the community as an extension of themselves or as a reflection or as part of themselves. And they want what's good for the other person just for the sake of the other person, not for their own benefit. And because both people, like I want what's good for you and you want what's good for me, and it's not that you know what's good for me and I know what's good for you. We're not paternalistic. We don't assume and take control over each other because I know better than you. No. But through this desire and through trying to understand what the other person's life is like, what they're going through, what they're doing, why they're doing it, what they're going for, we can support them better. So I'm just going to read these 2 pages and we'll wrap. Since these causes differ in species, so do the types of loving and types of friendship. I do think I'll come back and read um, the other assigned parts from uh, books 1 and 2, but I don't have time to do that today. I do have time to finish this out with the three types of friendship. Since these causes differ in species, so do the types of loving and types of friendship. Hence, friendship has 3 species corresponding to the 3 objects of love. Sorry, I should do it off the screen. For each object of love has a corresponding type of mutual loving combined with awareness of it. But those who love each other wish goods to each other only insofar as they love each other. Those who love each other for utility love the other not in his own right, but insofar as they gain some good for themselves from him. The same is true of those who love for pleasure, for they like a witty person not because of his character, but because he is pleasant to them. So in both utility and pleasure, it's about what I can get from you. It's not selfless, it's selfish friendship. Those who love, and so it's not stable either. It's not grounded in something beyond me. Those who love for utility or pleasure, then, are fond of a friend because of what is good or pleasant for themselves. Not insofar as the beloved is who he is, so for their own. But if I care about you, maybe because of some universal thing, that's still kind of abstract for Aristotle. What's actually stable for character, not because it's selfish but selfless, is if I like who you are. If I think that you're a good person, deserving of care and deserving of love. Uh, insofar as the beloved is who he is. But instead, insofar as he is useful or pleasant. Hence, these friendships, as well as the friends, are coincidental, since the beloved is not loved, meaning that they're temporal, they're temporary, changing, transient. Since the beloved is not loved insofar as he is who he is, but insofar as he provides some good or pleasure. And so these sorts of friendships are easily dissolved when the friends do not remain similar to what they were. For if someone is no longer pleasant or useful, the other stops loving him. What is useful does not remain the same, but is different at different times. Hence, when the cause of their being friends is removed, the friendship is dissolved too, on the assumption that the friendship aims at these useful results. This sort of friendship seems to arise especially among older people, since at that age they pursue the advantageous, not the pleasant, and also among those in their primary youth who pursue the expedient. So there are some youth who pursue the utility friendships, and that's when they're still like trying to start off. They're like entrepreneuring their first endeavor into the business class. Nor do such people live together very much, for sometimes they do not even find each other pleasant. Hence, they have no further need to meet in this way if they are not advantageous to each other, for each finds the other pleasant only to the extent that he expects some good from him. The friendship of hosts and guests is taken to be of this type too. The cause of friendship between young people seems to be pleasure, for their lives are guided by their feelings and they pursue above all what is pleasant for themselves and what is at hand. But as they grow up, what they find pleasant changes too. Hence, they are quick to become friends and quick to stop, for their friendship shifts with what they find pleasant, and the change in such pleasure is quick. Young people are prone to erotic passion, since this mostly accords with feelings and is caused by pleasure. That is why they love and quickly stop, often changing in a single day. These people wish to spend their days together and to live together, for this is how they gain the good things corresponding to their friendship. This is what I was saying. But I got it from Aristotle, obviously, right? But complete friendship is the friendship of good people similar in virtue, for they wish goods in the same way to each other insofar as they are good, and they are good in their own right. Hence, they wish goods to each other for each other's own sake. Now, those who wish goods to their friend for the friend's own sake are friends most of all, for they have this attitude because of the friend himself, not coincidentally. Hence, these people's friendship lasts as long as they are good, and virtue is enduring. Each of them is both good without qualification and good for his friend, since good people are both good without qualification and advantageous for each other. They are pleasant in the same ways too, since good people are pleasant both without qualification and for each other. They are pleasant for each other because each person finds his own actions and actions of that kind pleasant, and the actions of good people are the same or similar. It is reasonable that this sort of friendship is enduring, since it embraces in itself all the features that friends must have. For the cause of every friendship is good or pleasure, either unqualified or for the lover, and every friendship accords with some similarity. And all the features we have mentioned are found in this friendship because of the nature of the friends themselves. For they are similar in this way, i.e., in being good. Moreover, their friendship also has the other things. What is good without qualification and what is pleasant without qualification. And these are lovable most of all. Hence, loving and friendship are found most of all and at their best in these friends. These kinds of friendships are likely to be rare since such people are few. Further, they need time as well to grow accustomed to each other, for as the proverb says, they cannot know each other before they have shared their salt as often as it says, and they cannot accept each other or be friends until each appears lovable to the other, and gains the other's confidence. Those who are quick to treat each other in friendly ways wish to be friends, but are not friends, unless they are also lovable and know this. For though the wish for friendship comes quickly, friendship does not. There's also a part from the translator's introduction that's really helpful here. In Aristotle's view, a human being is a political animal insofar as human capacities and aims are completely fulfilled only in a community. So everything is political for Aristotle, and the human good cannot be achieved without politics. The individual's happiness must involve the good of fellow members of a community. Aristotle defends this claim in his discussion of friendship. All three of the main types of friendship, for pleasure, for advantage, and for the good, are concerned with the good of the other person. But only the best sort of friendship, friendship for the good between virtuous people, involves A's concern for B's good for B's own sake and for B's essential character. Again, still not paternalistic, still not assuming you know what B's good, right? It's not A's good. Well, in this sense, the possessiveness of A or B is about who is experiencing it, not who defines it. Uh, the own sake, for B's own sake, right? It's not paternalistic. It's not something that I get as well. Um, Another himself, so that if A and B are friends, A takes the attitudes to B that A also takes to A. Aristotle uses this feature of friendship to explain why friendship is part of a complete and self-sufficient life. Friendship involves living together, i.e., sharing the activities one counts as especially important in one's life, and especially the sharing of reasoning and thinking. Friends cooperate in deliberation, decision, and action, and the thoughts and actions of each provide reasons for the future thoughts and actions of the other. If A regards B as another self, then A will be concerned about B's aims and plans and pleased by B's successes, no less than by A's own. The cooperative aspects of friendship with B more fully realize A's own capacities as a rational agent, and so promote A's happiness more fully. For this reason, Aristotle thinks that the full development of a human being requires concern for the good of others. He defends his claim initially for friendship between individuals, but also for the type of friendship that forms a city, the complete community, which is in Politics 1252a 1 through 7, b 27 through 30. A city, the complete community that achieves the complete life that is identified with happiness. So this complete life, complete happiness, there's a good bit of that. Um, uh, so the human good proves to be activity of the soul in accord with virtue, and indeed with the best and most complete virtue if there are more virtues than one, and even moreover in a complete life. For one swallow does not make a spring, nor does one day make a spring, nor similarly does one day or a short time make us blessed and happy. The remaining possibility then is some sort of life of action of the part of the soul that has reason, um, is the purpose of, is the virtue of the human virtue. Doing things well. That's what he's talking about. Anyway, there's another part in the introduction I think is important. So this is a good passage on the normativity of the mean. It's not relativism. It is virtue ethics. It does depend on the person. It does depend on the history. It does depend on what is possible for the person to do. But it doesn't mean that anything goes. And it's the same in pragmatism. James doesn't say that everything goes. Same in utilitarianism. Doesn't say that everything goes. In arguing that a virtue of character must be a mean or an intermediate state, Aristotle does not recommend moderation in actions or in feelings for its own sake. He does not suggest, for instance, that if we achieve the mean in relation to anger, we will never be more than moderately angry. On the contrary, the virtuous person will be extremely angry on the occasions when extreme anger is called for. He discusses anger more fully in IV5. Still, Aristotle's doctrine is more than the trivial advice that we should do what is appropriate to the occasion. For in claiming that a mean state in relation to non-rational impulses and appetites is possible and desirable, he rejects other views about the desirable condition of feelings. The views he rejects include these. Virtue consists in indulgence of non-rational impulses, leaving them completely unchecked. So that's not it. 2, virtue requires suppression of non-rational impulses. Also not it. 3, virtue is nothing more than control of non-rational impulses by rational desire. Also still not the mean. In Aristotle's view, 3 is closest to being right, but is nonetheless mistaken because it confuses virtue with continence. Contrary to 3, virtue also demands harmony and agreement between the non-rational and the rational part under the guidance of the rational part. This would go very well with the courage and the tripartite soul in Plato. All right, guys, that's going to be it. Um, I might have time to read from books 1 and 2 tomorrow, maybe. Uh, and then we'll do Descartes next week. So thanks for being here. I'm sleepy. I want to see Winchester. Winchester, come here. Come on. Come on. Good boy. Come here. Get up here. Come on. Oh, no, up here. There you go. Say hi and bye. Thanks, guys.